Okay, so we're in the middle of the piece that the first discussion in the story of the Eitz Hadat between the snake and Chava, the Nachash and Chava, and we raised certain questions. Well, first, I just want to note that it's on the heels of the last piece. The last piece we talked about the Nachash himself, that he had witnessed Adam and Chava, and therefore he lusted after Chava, and so to speak, meaning the way the Chazal is describing it, his lusts were triggered and stirred, meaning he almost as if he had a Yetzer Hara inside him, and that's what instigated him. And yet, the next pasuk, when the Alshech HaKadosh describes the Nachash himself, when the pasuk actually introduces the Nachash, as opposed to the comments on that they were naked, it talks about how really this Nachash is representing a much greater form of evil, the entity known as the angel of evil itself, the Samach Mem, who's also the Yetzer Hara, and he's also the Satan, and he's also the Malach HaMavet. And so we said that if you look in the Psukim again, I'm just going to go over them one more time. it says, V'nachash haya arum mikol chayat hasadeh. The serpent was clever. The Targum says, Hakim. He was very, very smart. From all the animals of the field, Asher asa Adonai Elohim, that Havai Elohim made, Vayomer Ha'isha. And he said to the woman, Af ki amar Elohim lo tochlu mikol eitz hagan. Even, or did God say, even not to eat from all the other trees of the Gan? So I just want to point out that, the Rashi goes very much, Rashi's comments on these verses seem like very, very in line with what the Alshech is teaching us. So I just thought, I'd put it, first of all, he brings in the whole Midrash that the Nachash saw them. And then it says, Af ki amar. So how does Rashi learn Af ki amar? Shema amar lachem, maybe God had told you, lo tochlu mikol, meaning maybe God told you not to eat all the other fruit also. Ve'af al pi shera otam ochlim mishar perot, even though he sees them that they're actually eating from all the other fruits. Here be'aleha dvarim, he made many words upon her, kidei teshiveno, just so that she should answer him. He needed an entree just to talk about that tree. So he actually chose a corrupted, meaning an idea that he knew wasn't true, meaning as if it was just there's a word, like a whatever, he took on a pretense. So, and that's really what the Alshech is explaining to us here, that it doesn't seem to make any sense, and that's the way of the Yetzer Hara, to just start talking the conversation. So he introduces an idea that clearly isn't right, so that she can correct him. Okay, and just another point, because, so we had said that the Alshech HaKadosh said that the Nachash, he wanted to perhaps say that she should be very, very religious, and she should serve God even more, and maybe she should think of, and then he raised the issue of the death. Is the death a direct result of eating from the tree, and that's why God precluded them from eating it, to protect them? Or was it death as a punishment because they did not heed God's will? So, because there's a discrepancy both in what God says, he says, tamutun, and the Nachash and she says pen tamutun, and the Nachash says mot tamut, you will surely die. And we said, why does he use two languages? So the Alshech HaKadosh says, because there's two kinds of death, right? There's the death. He wanted to clarify which kind of death it was. Is it this death or that death? But then the Alshech HaKadosh also mentioned that there's the issue of, we'll see. She says that she adds not only what God said, but also lo tiguba, that she was told not to touch it. And the Alshech HaKadosh says maybe she's, the motamutun is, one is on touching it and one is on eating it, right? So actually, as the story continues, it says, Vatera isha ki tova eitz lema'achal. And she saw that it was good to eat. And Rashi has a I'm sorry. Lo motamutun, when the Nachash says you will surely not die. Dachva ad shenagabo. He pushed her until she touched it. The Amar la, he said, Kishem she'in mita b'negia. Just like there's no mita from, you're not going to get mavet from touching it. Kach ein mita ba'achila. Okay, so because we had a question of how to understand the Alshech, because if you're gonna die from touching it, you surely die from eating it. So why would you say don't have? Why would God say don't touch it and don't eat it? He should have said just don't touch it. It would have sufficed. So I'm just saying that this idea, maybe it doesn't make sense. I mean, that she thought even she's not allowed to touch it. How does that work? Why should she understand if God doesn't want you to eat from it also? But that was meaning somehow he used that. That's what he gained the upper hand with, because if he can undo, since she had this false idea about the aspect of touching it, he was able to undo even the assuredness of what God told her that she would die from eating it. But anyway, we're getting ahead of ourselves. I just want to point that out because Rashi kind of addressed this in his own way, a lot of the points that the Alshech is discussing. Okay, so we are on page 43, Mem Gimel, in my edition, on the first, the beginning of the first paragraph on the second column. Vayihi b'shama. No, I'm sorry, we did that. We're right underneath that. Yeah, okay. Okay, v'amar. And he said, so the verse says,
Where are you?
Ki yodea Elokim.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. So the verse says like this. It says, Vayomer hanachash ala isha lo mot tamutun, and the Nachash said to the woman, you will not surely die, ki yodea Elohim, God knows, ki biyom achalcha mimenu, on the day that you eat from it, v'nifkechu einechem, and your eyes will be opened, v'hayisem kelohim, and you will be like God, yodei tov v'ra, knowing good and evil. V'amar ki yodea Elokim, hein shtei ta'anot. So the Alshech is saying, in this statement, in this last verse, where the Nachash says, God surely knows, and that on the day you eat it, your eyes are you're gonna be like God, knowing good and evil. There's two issues here. There's two arguments. Achas, the first, be'amro ki yodea Elohim. What does he mean when he says that God knows? V'ashenit, and the second issue is be'amro ki biyom. Okay, so he divides the pasuk in half. He's saying there's two issues here. There's ki yodea Elohim biyom achalcha mimenu, that God knows on the day that you eat from it, and v'nifkuchu einechem, that your eyes will be open. V'hayitem kelohim yodea tov v'ra, that's a separate issue. Okay, so there's that God knows and what will happen to you on that day. Okay, ve'inyan lomar. This is what it means to say. Shema tomru. Perhaps you'll say, Gam im yaken kidvarecha. Even if it is so, like your words, lama ev haritzona v'yamiteni. Meaning, what this means is that even if the Nachash has a point to make that eating from the tree itself won't directly kill her, why should she go over the will of God and cause him to punish her? I mean, let's say, meaning, here, I'll say it again. Gam im ken kidvaracha. Even if it's true, like your argument, right? Lama eva ritzono v'yamiteni. Why should I go over his will, meaning violate his will, and he will kill me? Meaning, this is right. Shema Torah, meaning he's anticipating the argument. He's saying, let's say you're going to say, hey, but why should I? Why are you pushing me to do this? What do I have to gain from doing this? Al tachush ki halo yodea Elokim. Don't worry, because God surely knows. Kilomar im atechti, if you sin v'ta'avri ritzono and you violate His will, lo te'eshmi, you will not be guilty. Ki halo yodea Elohim me'ata. God knows what's going to be from now. V'im kain, and if so, muchachas at b'masech, you are forced to do what you're doing. Meaning, your destiny is defined by God's predetermined knowledge.
I see.
So you have nothing. Meaning, God knows. What does it have anything? Don't tell me there's an issue of free will here. Let's, I'm being chaotic. Let's see what you do. No matter what happens, you're in the clear. Right? God knows from now. If God knows, therefore you have no choice but to do what you're going to do. Because from when God actually knew that you would sin, why should He punish you? You'll see that there's going to be a whole bunch of arguments that sound very, very familiar to all of us in terms of our inner dialogue, and yet when we see them on paper, they make no sense because logically they just lull you into a story, but they try to introduce some sort of premise, but the truth is the whole premise doesn't make sense. Meaning, if you zoom out and you see what's happening, he's just pushing her to do something that she wouldn't necessarily want to do. V'shema tomri, maybe you'll say, Chava, ki perushech hu ha'emet, that your understanding of reality is true. Ki me'achalech me'etz hadat tov v'ra nimshechet hamita, that from eating from the tree of knowledge of good and bad itself comes death. Ach lo lamut miyad, but even if that's true, you're not going to die immediately. Ki im sheka'et einech yodat mahut ra v'chet yetzer hara. At this moment, you don't know what the essence of evil and sin are. And the Yetzer Hara, rak dveikut b'kedusha. All you know is cleaving to holiness, shehu hachayim v'atov, which is life and good. Ach be'achol me'etz hadat tov v'ra. But you know what's going to happen when you eat from the tree of knowledge of good and bad? Tikni armumit, you will acquire cleverness. V'yidbak bach koach hara v'yachtiech, and the power of evil will cleave to you, and you will sin. But not now, where you're in a state where you're not even embarrassed. Right? You don't know anything about the essence of evil. And the limbs that you have for copulating, to you they're just like eyes and hands. And in a manner that knowing evil will actually be your death. So al tachoshi, don't be concerned. If you're concerned about all that, meaning he's saying that's your posit. If that's true, you don't really have anything to worry about. Because on the day that you eat, right, it says, right, your eyes will be opened, and you'll be like God, knowing good and evil. What does he mean? Ladat hatov v'ara. At that moment, you will know good and evil. And through that, tasigu, you will be able to grasp. B'yotchem tzadikim. You will actually be able to be righteous. And then, only then will you be able to conquer your inclinations. Liyot ke'elohim, to be as pure as God. Meaning, over here, this is an argument that you can't really succeed in fulfilling your goal if you don't have any idea what evil is. How good is your choice if you don't know what it is? Meaning he's using that argument to push her to taste from evil, because he's saying that even what you want is not really possible. You're in a completely innocent state. You're not making a choice. That's ridiculous. Why don't you learn what it is, and then you could really achieve and accomplish what you're meant to be?
Right.
It's a very twisted argument.
Very believable.
It seems a little twisted, because at the end of the day, God said what he said. And anything else is, how can you tell me that really what God wants me to do is other than what he told me? There is no argument.
There is an argument. Can I make it?
Sure, yeah.
You have the angels that absolutely don't have free will, right? To an extent, angels.
But this is a misnomer. Explain to me what it means angels don't have free will.
Okay, so in other words, at the level of angels, the clarity is so great that they wouldn't even.
It's not that they never have tension. They never have tension because they don't have a Yetzer Hara, so they only want to do good.
Right. So in the level of Adam before the sin, he was a step down from there, but still at a much higher level than our stage. So the argument would be, in the same way that God wasn't happy to stay at the level of angels and wanted a world where free will is real, so that we can choose to have a relationship with God. Why don't you maximize that state so that your choice really is?
For one simple reason, because God said no. So, meaning you're already using all kinds of ideas that you have to insert in otherwise what was a very pure, very simple statement of what God's will was. And the only way to deviate from that is to start telling yourself somehow that what God really wanted is other than what he told you, and to start divining all kinds of things. Once you make that departure, it's easy to get lost. But I'm saying that departure is that's what undermines every argument.
So he's trying to
he's just meaning you could say whatever you want. Bottom line is you have to have that first leap of like, why is it okay to do anything other than what God said? And that's the fault there.
Well, is it? Because
right?
he set it up so that we would have the free will to do that. So when you say, why is it possible?
But I'm saying she's being seduced here. It's clear that it's a seduction. And the seduction can only happen once you're in the conversation. Because the conversation only makes sense once you're in it. But the fault is jumping in, even listening. Meaning the second the snake starts telling you, suggesting anything other than what God told you, It doesn't matter.
The reason I'm trying to be devil's advocate is
indeed.
Exactly. Is
Yeah.
that I'm trying to establish whether without the Nachash, Chava would have come to this conclusion anyway.
That what?
That actually this is just an extension of what God's created, and we're just increasing the voltage. But the objective is still the same, to overcome your will.
I don't think she would ever have gotten to that conclusion without the Nachash, because otherwise the Nachash wouldn't be in the story. Meaning, left to their own devices, they would have been fine. The Nachash was the necessary trigger to get the. Otherwise, they were just innocent, good. It was the darkness of the Nachash that starts to make things a little bit twisted. They were totally left to their own devices. They would have been pure like babies. I mean, so which really takes us back to the bigger question: what's God trying to do here?
Right.
Okay, but yeah, okay. So he's saying, listen, why don't you be what we call back home FTG, firmer than God, right? God told you X, Y, and Z, but maybe there's something else that you could do better. You can make God happier than what He asked. Okay. So really, in order to be a tzaddik, you have to know from evil. And the truth is, I think a lot of people, I've heard that this is in people's youth, when people are innocent, actually the first stage of innocence, when the Yetzer Hara first talks to them, this is the first step. Meaning, it's, of course, really what they want to do is they're being drawn to something that they don't want to do, but what they tell themselves is why it's necessary, because they identify what they think they are as somebody who only wants to do good. But really, I was told this is off limits, but how would I really, really make a choice if I don't really allow myself to partake and then know what it is, and then it'll be... But that's really the Yetzer Hara, okay? So 1 second. Al tachoshi, do not worry about this idea that you're going to die if you do it. Then it'll be good for you. Right now your eyes are covered from the ability to know evil. Your merit and your reward for being righteous is very minimal in this state of yours. You don't even know what bad is. However, through this, adarabah, just the opposite. On the day that you eat from it, your eyes will be open to truly know good and evil. And through this, you'll be able to grasp the lofty level of the righteous tzadikim, and to conquer your inclination, to be like God. That you will be similar to your Creator.
How is that similar to your God?
Ligzar ba'olam, in order to decree upon the world, v'liyitkayim mirov zchut, and in order to make established and exist from so much merit. Ve'in zerak miyotchem yodei tov ra, and that's just through you knowing tov ra. All you got to do is just know tov and ra, and then you will be mamish like Elokim. What does he mean like Elokim? Just like God is the living force that sustains the world, and He is the heights of purity. You will be able to achieve the heights of purity, and through your merit sustain the world. Masha enkein.
You mean if you can only achieve your heights of purity if you
taste evil first,
if you taste
and that will make your choice of good meaningful, and only then those lofty heights are available to you. I mean, you'll be just like God only after you taste from evil and choose good.
And how would we argue against that argument?
Like I said, that anything he's saying is just a suggestion of other than what God said, so it's moot. He's just playing with my head. God didn't feel the need to explain why and what, which would contextualize things, which would mean that we're meant to use our own calculations and analysis to know. God just basically told us what we need to know. That seems to be the logic here. Okay. Masha enkein, conversely, if this was not true, im lo tedu rak tov, if you only know good, ki bamet tizku, with what will you merit liyot kelohim, to be like God? Im ein lachem derech lachto, if there's no real possibility for sinning, then what's the point? Now, I have to say, When v'zeo v'nifkachu, and that's what it means, and your eyes will be opened, right? Yodeh, you will know. I just want to point out that in a way, he's not right, but he's right, because, we say that God, our neshamot are in some sort of chamber upstairs, whatever that means, in the Otzar neshamot, and they're just basking in the glorious radiance of God. And then God decides that he's going to take a soul and send it down here to earth in a body, and it's going to live a human life so that it could do Torah and mitzvahs to earn some sort of proximity to God that it can benefit from when it goes back to that dimension. Right? So the setup is, here you have a soul that's completely connected to God in the highest way. And what he does is, he separates it and sends it down here to earth and puts a body on it with a Yetzer Hara. Why? Not only that, but there's almost there's a certainty that in the valleys and the mountains in life, that we're going to incur so much spiritual damage on ourselves in the journey, and certainly crack some eggs to make an omelet, and there's a very real possibility of actually a failure. And why would it be that God would risk? Or why does it make any sense for us to leave the security of the proximity of that spiritual place that we're up there to do this, where it's only a guarantee, all you're gaining is the very real... So the answer is that obviously, I don't know if this explains it, but it's obvious that what that means is that the proximity that's being created and what we're connecting to through this is so much more meaningful than if we would have just stayed up there. It's not the same thing at all. Right, to the point where, we have to. That's really, right? So, but what's interesting is, if you think about it, the setup is that there has to be very, very real risk down here in order for our connection to be meaningful and real up there. So in a way, what the argument that he's making is that what really makes the choice of good meaningful is because there is a knowledge there is a very real possibility for downfall too. So I'm not saying that he's saying he's right, but that formula, there is something that he's resting that on. There is a certain truth to reality that the risk makes something real. But that doesn't mean that God doesn't want you to sin. You can't use sin to just God. You're right.
Could we argue like this, that really there's a risk-return reward level? In other words, up to Adam's level before the sin is the level of risk-return that God was happy with. More than that, yes.
Does that even make sense to you? Because he's right. If he doesn't have a Yetzer Hara, then what's the point?
He does have a Yetzer Hara. It's just
the
not,
nachash.
Not in...
The nachash.
Yeah, but it's,
meaning
it's not internal.
Chava could say, exactly, you're 100% right. And me deflecting you right now, I'm doing that. What do I have to eat from the Eitz HaDas for? You're pushing me. That's my schar. I could say no to you. That's what she should have done.
Right.
So meaning that's really the setup.
Right,
if she could have done that, meaning, right? And that was the test.
Right.
That's the contra force that she has to resist.
But I think
she fell for it.
Right, but I think the idea of the idea of up to Adam, Hashem wants that level of test and success.
There was a test here, right? And the proof is that they failed.
They failed the test.
Right, so there was a test.
Yeah.
So and that would have made it meaningful.
That would have made it. But God doesn't want us to necessarily go down to a lower level than that with a higher risk in order to get a high return.
So, there are those that talk about this and say the following. I don't remember if maybe it's the Shlomo Kadosh, I'm not sure, I have to double check. But meaning the idea was exactly that Adam Rishon, we didn't get up there yet, but perhaps Adam Rishon chose, and he said, I will up the ante so that when I save the world, it'll be so much more meaningful.
Right.
And then the critique on him is, but you're not fulfilling God's will anymore. Your sin is that you're making it about you.
Yes.
That's the failure here. God said, follow the orders and make it about his will. And you decided, how can I make this make more sense and have more meaning? And you inserted your whole agenda into it. That already defeats the purpose. And then the question on that we always had was, well, if he's doing that, it already sounds like he had the Eitz Hara in him. So what's going on there? Meaning, I when I was younger, I always struggled with it. When I was in yeshiva, I was around 19 when my Rebbe showed me this, And it always bothered me that every understanding at that point, every explanation, every model that you had of what's going on in this story, there was some sort of loophole where I always felt like, well, whatever cheshbon you're using to explain what was going on in Adam's head, it sounds like he already ate from the Eitz Hadas in order to have that. So like, what's going on? So what's the difference between before the Eitz Hadas and after? I mean, these are important things to parse out, and I'm revisiting it now. So we're all in it together. Okay. So we'll do another. Yeah, we'll keep going. We're almost one more paragraph to the end of the piece. O shiur hakatuv, or the verses is coming to explain. Lo motamutun, you won't surely die. Ka'amor, as is said. V'im kidvarech, and if it will be like your words, if your words are true, sha'amavet nimshechet me'a'etz hazeh, that the death is an extension of the actually eating from the tree of midat ra, ka'amor. I'm sorry, from eating, when you eat from the tree, so you'll taste the evil in the tree, and the evil comes with death. Ki al yedei, and through this, yimashech lachto, it will push you to sin, tamid, always, v'yamut ba'avano, and then you will die in your sin. Ein chashash, you don't have to worry about that. Ki lo yimana, o hayedia machrat, o ena machrat. He's saying, that will not stop you. Either God's knowledge is what will determine what you do or not. Im machrat, if you have to sin, if you're going to do this, hine ki yodei Elohim, God already knows. Asher tachtu, He knows that you're going to sin. Umachrachem atem, therefore you have to. It's your destiny. V'im eina machrat, and if his knowledge does not predetermine your behavior, hine lo yimashech rak ki beyom achalchem mimeno v'nifkechu einechem livchar. So in that regard, you're not going to die right away if you eat from it, because you're going to get like a freebie. Meaning only then your eyes will know, your eyes will be open once you eat from it, and then you'll be able to choose. So he's also, in his argument, he's saying that eating from it immediately is not the choice to do evil, but just to know evil. So that's the direct result of death from that, meaning you're not going to die right away, and therefore, and you're not going to be obligated to be drawn after the evil, to definitely sin, just like God knows between the good and the evil, because there's nothing hidden from him. And even so, God knows evil, and it doesn't force him to sin. God's the best, and you can't tell me he has any less knowledge of evil than he does good. So the knowledge of evil does not make a negative impression on God at all. And God is the greatest. Some people say God is great, but he's the greatest. Whatever Muhammad Ali says. Ken gama atem, you too, efshar lachem, it's possible for you, tiyu kelohim, you will be like God. Habilti nimshach, who is not drawn achar hara, after evil, im heyot yodo, even though he knows it. Ki betov b'chiratchem, lo tateh etchem yediat hara la'asot ra. Because with your choice to continue to do good, you will not stray after your knowledge of evil to do bad. Okay, so that's a clever way.
So eating from the tree is not necessarily bad. It's just giving you the dad, the knowledge to choose properly, not to eat.
That's what he's saying. Okay, so that's a very deep and smart way of reading these very mysterious words. I mean, he's making sense of the arguments inherent in those verses. Okay, should we do the next piece?
Yeah, we've got 15 minutes.
Okay, so back in the Chumash, this is where she does it. Vatera ha'isha ki tov ha'etz lema'achal. And she saw, the woman, that the tree is good to eat. How do you see that a tree is good to eat? V'chi ta'ava hu la'einayim. And it is a lustful thing to the eyes. It's a v'nachmad ha'etz lahaskil, and it is pleasant, the tree to grasp, lahaskil, to enlighten. Vatikach mi piryo vatochal, and she took from its fruit, and she ate. Vatiten gam leisha ima vayochal, and she gave to her man too, and he ate. Okay, so it describes all these things. It says that the woman saw that the eights was good, and then it says, and it was a lust to the eyes. So what's the difference between what she saw and the description of how it affected her eyes? And it was pleasant to be enlightened by, right? What does any of this mean? And she took from the tree vatocha, and she ate, and she gave it also laisha, to her man, ima, with her vayocha. So did it have to say ima over there? No. Okay.
And what does the gum refer to? I think this is just him in the hair.
Right. So he's going to mention that she fed it to all the animals except for the chol.
Except for the?
Chol.
Chol.
Chet vav lamed. We're going to read that. Yeah. I haven't figured
What
out.
animal is that?
I have not been able to ascertain that.
I thought everything but the fish.
There you go. That's the fish. The chol. Thank you. I was looking for it. I couldn't find it. Okay. Amar. She'al yedei hapitoi halaz, that through this aforementioned seduction, be'amar eleh ki tov ladat, when the Nachash explained to her that it is actually good to know, gam et hara, also the evil, l'man hiskil lehetiv, in order that she could be enlightened to do good, ki yir'eh v'yavchin v'yizkeh zchut rav, because she will see and she will be able to she will distinguish and she will merit a great merit. Mashe enkein, conversely, bevilti yodea mahut rav, she does not know the essence of evil, ki yekal scharo ba'asototo, that it will lighten the possibility of her reward of doing good. Al zeh shat aliba, and that's what got her attention. That's what she turned her heart towards. That last argument. V'hi achat mehachalukot shera'ata b'sichla lekabel atzato, and that is one of the slippages, the one way that he got her to slip up, that she saw in her head, how she understood in her mind to accept his counsel. But Amro, when he said, when the verse says, "V'nachmad ha'etz lahaskil," it says, and the tree was pleasant to be enlightened by. Kasher yavo b'siyat d'ishmai, as will be explained with the help of heaven.
So basically, he put many arguments to her. The one that won the will.
Primarily two arguments. That's what we said. Two arguments. The first pasuk, and the first half of the pasuk, that God knows, meaning you can't do any harm. Whatever you do is predetermined. Right. You're not going to be faulted. And the second one was that you really have to do this. If you really care about serving God, you're not going to be able to sustain the universe with the kind of merits that you're going to accrue from doing good without having conflict.
So it's the enlightenment. The second of the two.
Right. That's what he's saying got her. V'ha'inyan kihine asher lo nusa b'chet, since she had been not experienced, she was inexperienced in sin. V'chol ma'yanav shkuyim udvekim b'kedushat avodat Hashem. I'm sorry, we're talking about Adam here, I guess, because it's all in masculine. But it's strange because I think we're talking about Chava. But okay, I'll read it as is. Since he was not experienced in sin, and all v'chol ma'yanav shkuyim udvekim b'kedushat avodat Hashem, and all his faculties were immersed in, all his powers were totally immersed and cleaving to the purity, the holiness of service of God. Ki b'hizdamen avera liado, when a sin would come to his hands, meaning if a sin was made available for him to do, an opportunity to sin, v'libo nokvo, and his heart is pushing him, hine yitzu hara yashiv amarav lo. So, meaning, let's say that a person who is completely immersed in avodat Hashem, totally pure, and all of a sudden he's approached by the possibility to do an avera, and you would think that he's right. He's totally pure. So hine yitzar hara yashiv amarav lo. What will his yitzar hara say to him? Re'ena ki tov ta'ama. Look at how good its taste is. And don't pass on the opportunity of this delicious sin, because it will be sweet for you and pleasant. So he's going to describe now an inner dialogue of a back and forth with somebody and his Yetzer Hara. So ve'im od yashuv elav yitzro hatov lomar lo, and what if this individual's good inclination will answer back to that. What is it for you? Why should you taste the honey of the bees? And not to be concerned about their sting in purgatory downstairs. Because that's where it's going to end up chasing you. Because it is much greater, the bitterness of the sting than the honey. Meaning, first, his Yetzer Hara says, hey man, it's really, really good. And then his Yetzer Tov says, you're going to pay for that. And in the end, you're going to be sorry, and it's going to outweigh, the cost is going to outweigh the benefit.
Yeah.
And then the Yetzer Hara comes back and says, Halo neged einecha nachon biyodcha nofet tzufim. Right next, across from your eyes, prepared in your hand, right, poised to be taken by you, is this sweet honey. Echol ushtei v'hitaneg biyom tova. Why don't you eat and drink and have and make yourself a holiday. And what's going to be after you die? Don't worry about that. Live in the now. All you have is what's in front of your eyes, what your eyes can see. And then what's the Yetzer Hara going to say? Meaning the Yetzer Hara says consequences. And then the Yetzer Tov says consequences. The Yetzer Hara says, forget about the consequences. Okay, so he doesn't have an argument, right? He's not answering back with Chachma. He's just trying to push a person to a certain behavior, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, so v'gam ki yitzur hatov yashiv amarav leimor, and then his good inclination will respond and say ki halo haschar va'onish lo nister adarkam mimotzei dat emunot omem ki ilu hein munachim lafanecha. Okay, it will say is not ki halo haschar va'onish, is not the reward and punishment. It is not, their path is not hidden from those that seek out knowledge, those that are steadfast to faith. It should be as if they are placed right in front of you. Meaning somebody who is an Oved Hashem, even though Schar ve'onesh is something that comes later, it's practically like it's right there in front of you. And that's not going to, what the Yetzer Tov says, is not going to keep the Yetzer Hara from responding to that with a storm and saying, Al na timana achapam lefachot mitom chet. Okay, but just don't pass up this opportunity at least to have a taste. Asher lo nisita v'lo yadato. Taste something that you've never experienced and you don't know. Laman teda, at least that you should know v'taskil, and you'll be enlightened. Havchana tov v'ra. At least you'll be able to know what the difference is and why you are committed to not doing that. Right? Asher lo yadata. At least you'll know the difference between good and bad from the bad that you now don't know. Ki mahut hara umtziuta. You don't understand the essence of evil and its being. And afterwards, ish chacham ata, you're a smart guy. After you taste it, you'll figure out liv charbatov. You'll be able to withstand your convictions and choose good still. Because all of it, your palate has tasted. Vihine shalosh ela rata hiisha berayon ucha. These three things the woman saw in her mind's eye, or in the mind of her spirit. Bihiyot liban nadon bekirba im ta'aseh im tachtal. When she was considering in her heart whether to do it or not, or to abstain. Rishona, what was the first issue? Ki tova etz lama'achal. The tree was good to eat. What does that mean? Hu hana. That's the pleasure. Like we started with the inner dialogue, right? Don't pass up this opportunity. It's so sweet. Shenit, the second level, levatel ha'onesh sheba'achrita marak hil'ana, to nullify the punishment that would come after the act, which is bitterer than wormwood. Meaning that's when the Yetzer Hara says, don't think about consequences. Shata liba, right? And to that issue, her heart turned, kitov, V'chi ta'avahu la'inayim. So when the pasuk says, and it was a lust for the eyes, that's when it's not just that it was good to eat, the initial desire for something sweet, but it was the pushing back of the idea of consequences. It was overcoming the idea of consequences, and that's why it uses a lashon ta'ava. It was a lust. And it was to her eyes, because if you recall in the inner dialogue we said what's before you and what's after you, right? The Yetzer Hara says, that's later. Just deal with what's right in front of you, le'inayim, right? Ki ta'ava tachet hu le'inayim, because the lust for the sin is what's across what a person is looking at now. It's in front of you, the eyes. V'lo la'achar zman, and you're not thinking about what's going to come after time, ka'onesh, like the punishment shla'achar mavet, which comes after death. Ve'echacha tuchal na'aniach, how would you be able to place down hanira la'ayin, that which you see with your eye, ba'ad asher lo tiran einah. Why would you put down something that is real to you in front of your eyes for something that is not in front of your eyes? This is more real. V'hu ma'amarenu al pasuk hayom shilamti nidarai. So there's a verse in Mishlei that says, today I paid back my vow. And there's another verse that says, also in Mishlei, Bal pasuk ki lachamo lechem resha, that their bread is the bread of iniquity or wickedness. So Chazal say on their comments on those psukim are ultimately ki hayetzer hara porei la'alter. You should know that the Yetzer Hara, he pays back right. I'm sorry. You pay him back right away. He comes to collect immediately. V'ala shlishit, and on the third level of the dialogue, the inner dialogue, Amar, right? The verse says, "V'nachmad ha'itz lahaskil," and the tree was pleasant for illumination, for being illuminated intellectually. Ki gam shelo tibatzer yediah ki lo tov hadavar.
What's the difference between? I didn't understand the difference between that and the second one.
Okay, so the first one is the sweetness of the thing right now.
Yeah.
And then when you start to consider consequences, then there's the pushback against consequences. Right. That's the second one. It's right in front of your eyes. Right. Forget that, right? And the third one is v'nachmara is lahaskil. What's lahaskil here? It's being enlightened.
Oh, the enlightenment.
Right, which means that maybe I need to do it because ultimately that's what's going to position me to fulfill my mission.
Right.
And that's what we said got her, right? She wants to be enlightened. She's choosing bad, ironically, because she wants to be enlightened, right? Even though her, it would not stop her yediyah because it's not good. Like that, it's proper in its hands a day of darkness and hell. So even though the thing itself is not good, and it's putting in your hand a day of darkness and hell, it's not going to stop you. That act is not. It still won't take away from the pleasantness. Ki yichamdeno ha'adam, a person will desire lefachot, at least lahaskil, to be enlightened, u'lavchin, to be able to discern bein tov v'ra, between good and evil. I mean, once that cat's out of the bag, right? A person says, well, that I can't say no to. If that's the only way to do that, how can I say no? Because that's what I want. I mean, that's what I'm committed to.
That's the enlightenment she's talking about?
Meaning, once you look at the sin in terms of that it's necessary for enlightenment, there's no going back, because it's basically, that's what's joined, that's what's conformed. This sin is no longer a sin now. This is actually what she was meant to do before. This is what she wants. So the das uladat mahuto mima yifrosh, and to know the essence of what to abstain from. You got to know what's the nature of evil, so you know what evil is, so you can identify it and then avoid it. Al kain, therefore, yadeh shalcha, her hand went forth, vatikach, and she took mipiryo, from its fruit, vatocha, and she ate it. Okay, so it's very nice. He's explaining that those three levels of the inner dialogue between a person's Yetzer Hara and Yetzer Tov are all reflected in the pasuk when it lists all the different dimensions of what drew her to the achila.
Good.
Okay, we're good?
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you. Shkoyach. To be continued.